Oh, by the way, notice you probably noticed this in the Hebrew text. You have these paragraph markers, and there's two different ones that they use. This is kind of like, it would be an anachronism to call it the lectionary, but the Hebrew Bible, and this goes all the way back to the synagogue. I mean, is that you have breaks within the Masoretic text that showed kind of the pericopes, if you will, that would be read within the Jewish communities. That's what these large P's, and you probably notice there's also some somics here and there in the text. So this is actually marked off as a unit. It makes sense because it reads as a unit in our text too. So let's go ahead and walk through the passage together. We have vata. So this is a typical kind of interjection or an adverb. It just means now. And in this case, Israel, and it's vocative. So it's like now Israel or now, O Israel. What, and you have to supply this, what is, and here's the verb, shoel. This is a call participle functioning really in a predicate way as a main verb. So what is Yahweh, your God, asking or requesting, requiring, me'immak, from you is how you'd want to translate that, or with you, but literally, but just be better, from you. And here's your second masculine singular suffix on this. So we have this prepositional phrase, ki'im. This sometimes is tricky to translate, where if you just look at it individually, because you're like, okay, that's if or when or because, but it ends up being commonly used ki and im together. And when they're put together, it's not for if, it's more like the idea of except, E-X-C-E-P-T. So it's like, what does the Lord require of you except, or but. Then we have a series of phrases that have infinitives. Many of these are going to have most of these have the lamed on it to announce it, but we see some infinitives from some different types of verbs. This is from Yara, except to fear Yahweh, your God. Then we have another infinitive or infinitive construct. This is from halak, and notice loses the initial sound. Halak's a typically irregular verb, and sort of like a first yod, this gets a ballast tav. So the tav there is just added because you lose the sound at the front. So to fear Yahweh your God, to walk bekol derakav, in all his ways. Notice this is plural. So the kamatz, yod, vav, this is your third masculine singular suffix on a plural word. So it's his ways. And another infinitive from ahav, and to love him. And another infinitive, to serve or to worship Yahweh your God. And then now this sounds like the Shema, right? Bekol levavaka uvakol nafshaka, with all your heart and with all your, traditionally, soul, or all that you are. Then it continues. Lish more, to keep eth mitzvot Adonai, the commandments of Yahweh and his statutes. Asher starts a relative clause, which anoki I, so now Moses is saying, which I, betzaveka, here we have a pe'el participle from sava, from commandment, or from command, which I am commanding you. It's got the suffix on it. Hayom, the day, but we've seen this a million times in Deuteronomy already, not a million, maybe 100 times. Today, which I'm commanding you today, letov lak, for good for you, or for your good. So it's interesting, and we can say more about this after we get all the way through this, but it's interesting the way that it's Moses, Deuteronomy frames out faithfulness. It's not, it's something that you do for your good. So we just want to remember that. Hain at the beginning, this word is short for hene. It's like behold. Behold, and this is kind of an, if you try to translate verse 14, it's a little tricky. It's like something like belonging to Yahweh your God, the heavens and the heavens of the heavens, the earth and all which is in it. So this is kind of a phrase. This text goes beyond teaching to reflecting on who God is. And remember, one of the key pieces of Deuteronomy is its calling strongly for the solitary worship of the Lord. And part of that is going to be grounded in the Exodus, and we're going to hear that language, but part of it is also in the character, in the identity of the God who was the God of the Exodus. And this is very much exclaiming Yahweh, your God, not just as any God, but he's a God to whom all creation belongs, both heaven or heavens and the heaven of the heavens, right? So that's an interesting phrase. Or sometimes you might say even the highest heavens. Okay, verse 15. And this is a little odd to translate because we have these two words here, this verb hashak, and then we have the typical word for love. This word kind of means love as well. So this is a kind of an interesting phrase. Rock is only, surely, yet. Yahweh sort of loved your fathers in order to love them. And so you can see like some English translations, like I have the R in our ESV sitting over here, yet the Lord set his heart in love on your father. So this is a kind of a word, this double use of these two essentially sort of synonymous terms, emphasizing God's faithful commitment and to not just Israel here standing before Moses this day, but to the fathers and to the mothers, their ancestors. And so then the second half's a little bit easier. We have a vav consecutive imperfect here. And he chose, and chose typically has its object with the preposition bait on it. And he chose their offspring after them. And who is their offspring? You. So this is another way of defining offspring. It's you. From all the people according to this day, or as this day. And so there's that's verse 15. So it's their chosenness. And this is similar to Exodus 19, 4-6. I've referred to that text a few times in class. Exodus 19, 4-6, verses 5 and 6, the transition between verse 5 and verse 6 of Exodus 19 says something like, for the whole earth is mine, or indeed the whole earth is mine. You will be for me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So what we see here in this part of Deuteronomy is the chosenness of God's people. And in some ways, there's a little contrast because you might say, well, geez, the whole earth belongs to God, but yet this God has actually picked Israel's ancestors and those who are alive today. So this is a picture of their chosenness. So how do you respond to the chosenness? And this is where we get one of the distinctive contributions of Deuteronomy. And if you hopefully got the chance to watch the video I created for you last week, but now we have a response, and this is a perfect with vav consecutive. So it's has some expectations like you will circumcise, and it's not circumcise typical things. It's circumcise the foreskin of your heart. So there's a metaphor, and this is one of those important phrases that comes down into even Wesleyan theology today. John Wesley has a famous sermon, The Circumcision of the Heart. This gets into Wesleyan teaching on entire sanctification, and it goes all the way back here to Deuteronomy. Now, if you watched my video last week, you know that here God is calling Israel to circumcise their hearts, essentially. In Deuteronomy 30, verse 6, which is the other occurrence, it's a promise that God will circumcise their hearts. So we see kind of the classic both God's people have a part and God has a part. The synergistic view of the relationship between humanity and God that is part of Wesleyan theology, but you can see it here in Deuteronomy. So, and you will circumcise the foreskins of your heart. And then we get another perfect that has the vav on it. So this is perfect with vav consecutive. And you will, you will not be stubborn. Your back of your neck will not be, you will not stiffen the back of your neck. You will not be stubborn any longer. Did want to point out this word here, this verb. This is just a straight imperfect. It's a hifil with the pot. Notice the patak under the performative, and this is a third hay verb. So it's the kof, sheen, hay is the root. This is one of the words that shows up in Exodus when it's talking about hardening Pharaoh's heart, for example. So this is a place, don't harden your neck. Don't become stiff-necked, if you will, is a traditional way of translating this. Then we get key, and unlike the key that we saw back in, where was that at? Oh, geez, beginning of 13. Somewhere we had a key. Oh, back in verse 12 where we had keyim. Here in verse 17, this is a straight declaration of substantiation. This is the for because, giving the reason for Yahweh your God. Now this is pretty cool. You get these words of praise of who God is. He is the God of gods and Adonai ha-Adonim and Lord of lords, the God, the great and mighty God, and wonderful or awesome God, who literally, he does not lift face, which has to do with being impartial. But notice we do have literally something like face. He does not lift face. And he does not take a bribe, which is, again, quite interesting as a way to describe God. It's like, geez, we didn't know we could. But this is critical because this is part of the missional witness of Deuteronomy. One of the realities in the pagan worldview, because we talked back when we did the Shema that God is the one and only, is this is about allegiance to God, but the reality is that God is qualitatively different than the gods. So important. And so the gods, you approach them through means of manipulation because they're part of this world. Probably draw something on my board here at the once we come back out of this screen share. But this whole issue of not taking bribes and not being partial is critical because Yahweh's different than the other gods. So we have that phrase. The one, and what else do we say about this? Is all these affirmations about who God is, and now we have and making or doing justice. Well, justice for who? Not just justice for the powerful, justice for the fatherless, the Yotham, and the widow. So it's immediately going to how Yahweh, even though he's the great and mighty and awesome God, he demonstrates that by not being up for manipulation by the well-connected who can maybe slip a couple of some money or some gold or whatever, but instead he does mishpat, justice for the fatherless and for the widow, and loves, this is interesting too, loves the stranger or the sojourner. So this is a person coming into the community from the outside. La tate. This is infinitive. And hopefully getting the use if you see a verbal form as a llama, that's an infinitive, or what we call in Arnold Choya infinitive construct. This is a common word, but it's very irregular. This is from Nathan, to give. And notice Nathan is doubly weak. It has obviously two noons. The first one, you lose that sound, and you also lose the second one because the noons would assimilate, and you get this ballast tav here. So to give to him, to who? The sojourner. Lechem, be careful, it's not lehem, it's lechem. So this is bread, and not just bread, clothes. So he's clothing the stranger and also giving the stranger food. And so this draws implications then for how Israel is going to be. Now we have another command. We saw the first command was circumcise foreskin of your heart. And now there's some tangible actions here. Perfect with Vav consecutive. You will love F Hager, the stranger, the sojourner, for, now this is the reason, Hayitim, you were Gerim, strangers, sojourners, Be'eretz Mitzrayim, in the land of Egypt. So it's a reference back to that, to their experience in Egypt. Again, the irony of a command like this is presumably Israel has come out of Egypt and they haven't learned from their own mistakes, and so or their own experience. So maybe perhaps they're actually oppressing, but God says, hey, you were strangers back in Egypt. So notice what Egypt, how that functions. Egypt is the place of redemption, and it was the place where Israel had its identity forged as persons delivered by God when they were in distress and marginalized themselves. So that becomes the basis for a new kind of an ethic, not where they act like the Egyptians, but they remember how they were treated by the Egyptians, and they don't extend similar treatment to others. Okay, what you're going to love the stranger. And then we have another series of commands. And Yahweh your God, you will fear. You will serve him. Now, let me show you something here on the Hebrew, because you can kind of run through these and lose track of what goes. Like this word here, otho, it goes with the next word, not just because we already have an object here, but notice, I want to show you how the accent marks actually help us to read this text a little bit in case we had any questions. Notice the accent mark underneath the resh. This little curved line next to the kamatz. Notice how it's kind of pointing back towards the words in front of it. And then this accent mark here on otho is opened towards the word that comes after it. This is what's called a disjunctive accent mark. It says read it with what comes in front of it. This little accent mark here is a conjunctive accent mark saying read it with the word that comes after it. And then this accent mark here, this is an atnach. This is a disjunctive saying pause. So this gives the accent marks break this sentence up into little pieces. So you will fear Yahweh your God, and you will serve him, and you will cling to him, and by his name you will swear. And 21, he, this is your praise, so you have to supply an is your praise, and he, supply is your God, who has done with you or for you, hagadolot, the great things and the terrifying things, these great and terrifying things. So we have, notice all of these have the definite article and the demonstratives of plural, the these. So the great things, the terrifying things, the these great and terrifying things, which your eyes, plural, have seen. And in the last verse, with 70 nephesh, with 70 persons, your fathers went down Mitzrayim, this is a directive, hey, to Egypt. But now Yahweh, your God, made you keve hashemayim, as the stars of the heavens, as for number, or as numerous. And so that's the whole text. Let me stop there, and I'm going to and see if you have questions.